My father locked the dining room doors from the inside, then slid a steak knife across the white tablecloth until the sharp tip pointed directly at my chest. Transfer the money. Rosalind, he whispered, or we see how much you really value your life. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just watched my sister Jessica, hunched over my laptop, her eyes manic with greed as she prepared to drain $3.8 million from my account. My mother was gripping the edge of the table, trembling, waiting to be rich again. They thought they were robbing me blind. They didn't know the enter key Jessica was about to press wasn't linked to a bank. It was a silent panic button wired directly to the state police. I took a slow sip of wine. 3, 2, 1. Drop a comment, and let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. 48 hours before, my father pointed a steak knife at me. The only danger I faced was a cold cup of coffee. I was standing in my apartment, in downtown Boston. A space that was everything my childhood home wasn't: quiet, paid for, and safe. The morning sun hit the quartz countertops I had bought with my own money. I was reviewing a case file on a shell company in the Caymans when my phone buzzed against the marble. The screen lit up with a single word. Mother. I stared at it. We hadn't spoken in 6 months. Not since I refused to co-sign a loan for my sister's failed boutique. My thumb hovered over the decline button. Logic told me to let it go to voicemail. Experience told me that if Linda was calling at 8 in the morning, she wanted something, and she wouldn't stop until she got it. I answered. What is it, Linda? Rosalind, honey. Her voice was breathless, dripping with a sweetness that usually cost me 5 figures. Is that how you answer your mother? We've been so worried about you. I'm fine. What do you want? We want to see you, she said, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. Your father and we've been doing a lot of thinking. About Grandma Margaret. It's been a year since she passed, and we never really had a proper family dinner to honor her. We want you to come home this Friday. Just us. Family. I leaned against the counter, analyzing her tone the way I analyzed spreadsheets. The pitch was too high. The pacing was rushed. She was lying. My parents didn't do memorial dinners. They did performative grief when there was an audience, and they did shakedowns when there wasn't. I have plans, I lied. Please, Rosalind, she interrupted, desperation leaking through. Jessica will be there. She's going through a hard time. She needs her big sister. We all need to heal. I'm making your favorite roast. For a second, the old instinct flared up, the desperate, pathetic hope that maybe, just maybe, they actually missed me. They still saw me as the mousy teenager who would do anything for a scrap of affection. They didn't know the person I was now. They didn't know that at 32 years old, Rosalind wasn't just the quiet daughter anymore. I was a forensic accountant. I spent my days hunting down hidden assets for federal indictments. I knew how to spot a Ponzi scheme. And I certainly knew how to spot a hustle. And, Linda added, too casually, bring that little bank key fob of yours. The blue one. Dad found some old savings bonds of Grandma's in the attic, and we think we might need your trustee access to cash them out for the estate. The trap snapped shut. There were no bonds. I had audited Grandma Margaret's estate down to the last postage stamp before she died. Everything was already in the blind trust I controlled. They didn't want to honor my grandmother. They wanted the digital key to the $3.8 million sitting in the trust account. They were inviting me over to rob me. Rosalind? Are you there? I looked at my reflection in the window. My eyes were cold. If I said no, they would just keep coming. They would show up at my job, harass my friends, maybe even try to forge my signature again. The only way to stop a parasite is to let it think it's found a vein, and then poison the blood. I'm here, I said, my voice steady. I'll be there, Mom. Friday night. Good, she breathed. Bring the fob. Don't be late. She hung up. I put the phone down and walked over to my laptop. I didn't feel fear. I felt the icy clarity of a hunter who just spotted movement in the brush. They wanted access to the account? Fine. I would give it to them. I opened a new coding window. It was time to build a mirror. The next morning, I sat across from Harrison in his glass-walled office. Harrison wasn't just a lawyer. He was a shark in a 3-piece suit who specialized in asset protection. He looked at the plan I'd laid out on his desk, his eyebrows raising a fraction of an inch. You know this is aggressive, he said, tapping the schematic I'd drawn. We could just file a restraining order. We could send a cease and desist. You don't have to walk into the lion's den. A restraining order is a piece of paper, I said, my voice flat. My parents don't respect paper. They respect consequences. If I block them, they'll just find another way to harass me. I need to nuke the bridge while they're standing on it. Harrison stared at me for a long moment. Then a slow, sharp smile spread across his face. If they willingly enter their credentials into a system designed to verify identity, and then attempt an unauthorized transfer, well, that's entirely on them. I'll have the state police contacts on standby. I left his office and went straight to work. I didn't need a team. I needed caffeine and silence. I opened my laptop and started coding. I wasn't building a bank website. I was building a mirror. I cloned the bank's interface down to the pixel, the soothing blue logo, the reassuring font, the dual-factor authentication prompt. To the naked eye, it was the portal to my grandmother's millions. In reality, it was a data vacuum. Every keystroke, every mouse click, every biometric scan from the webcam would be captured, packaged, and instantly emailed to the Cybercrimes Division. As I typed the code for the fake transfer button, my hand cramped. I shook it out, and for a second, the blue light of the monitor blurred into the flashing blue lights of a police cruiser in the rain. I was 17 again. The smell of wet asphalt and burnt rubber filled my nose. My parents' sedan was wrapped around a telephone pole a mile from our house. Jessica was in the driver's seat, sobbing, reeking of vodka and peach schnapps. I was in the passenger seat, my forehead bleeding from hitting the dashboard. I hadn't even been in the car when she crashed. I'd walked down the road because she called me, screaming for help. My father arrived before the cops. He didn't check if we were hurt. He checked who was in the driver's seat. He looked at Jessica, hysterical and drunk, and then he looked at me, sober and bleeding. "Move," he ordered. "What?" I asked, dazed. "Switch seats." Now. They dragged me into the driver's seat. My mother grabbed my face, her hands cold. She didn't yell, she didn't panic. That was the most terrifying part. She spoke to me in a soft, soothing voice, like she was explaining why I needed to eat my vegetables. "Rosalind, honey," she whispered, wiping blood from my eye. "Jessica has her pageant next month. She has the scholarship. A DUI will ruin her life. You're strong. You're smart. You can handle a juvenile record. It gets sealed when you're 18 anyway. Do this for your sister. It's just a little sacrifice." They normalized it. They made destroying my future sound like a household chore, a simple act of sisterly love. If I said no, I was the selfish one. I was the one ruining the family. So I sat there. I took the breathalyzer. I took the blame. I lost my own scholarship to a top university because of the character concern on my record. I spent my first year of adulthood scrubbing toilets to pay for community college while Jessica went to parties on my parents' dime. I blinked, and the memory vanished. I was back in my apartment, the code blinking on the screen. They had used my love against me then. They had weaponized my loyalty. But they had forgotten that loyalty has an expiration date. I wasn't the 17-year-old girl bleeding in the rain anymore. I was the woman who audits cartels. I finalized the script and hit save. The trap was armed. The gravel of the driveway crunched under my tires, sounding suspiciously like bones breaking. I pulled up to the estate, killing the engine but leaving the lights on for a moment to illuminate the facade. My parents' house in Connecticut was designed to impress people they hated. It was a sprawling, faux Gatsby monstrosity with white columns and manicured hedges. To the untrained eye, it screamed old money. To my eye, the eye of an auditor, it screamed leverage. I could see the cracks in the stucco near the foundation, the peeling paint on the window frames that hadn't been touched in years. The house was like them. A beautiful shell rotting from the inside out. I grabbed my bag, checking for the laptop one last time, and stepped out into the humid night air. Linda opened the door before I could knock. She was wearing a silk gown that looked 2 seasons old and smelled overpowering of lilies. It was a funeral smell, heavy and cloying, used to mask the scent of damp plaster and rising panic. "You made it," she said, her smile tight as a snare drum. "Come in, darling. We've been waiting." She didn't hug me. She ushered me into the foyer where Jessica was pacing. My sister looked like a cover model for a magazine about nervous breakdowns. She was wearing a vintage Chanel dress, but her hair was fraying at the edges, and her eyes were darting around the room as if she expected the wallpaper to attack her. She stopped when she saw me, her eyes raking over my charcoal business suit. "You wore that?" she scoffed, her voice shrill. "It's a family dinner, Rosalind, not a tax audit. You look like a funeral director." "Hello to you too, Jessica," I said, walking past her. "You look tired." "I'm not tired," she snapped, scratching at her arm. "I'm stressed. Not that you would understand stress. Your biggest problem is probably finding a parking spot at your boring office." I didn't take the bait. I just walked into the dining room. The table was set with the wedding china fine bone porcelain with gold rims that they probably hadn't finished paying off. But the food served on it was pathetic. A dry, store-bought roast chicken, and some wilted asparagus. It was a poverty meal served on a king's table. Thomas was sitting at the head of the table. He didn't stand up. He looked smaller than I remembered, his skin gray and clammy. He poured himself a glass of wine with a hand that shook noticeably. "Sit down," he ordered. I sat. I placed my bag next to my chair, ensuring the laptop was within easy reach. We ate in silence for 3 minutes. The only sound was the scraping of silver forks against china. The air in the room was so thick with tension it felt pressurized, like the cabin of a plane about to crash. Thomas dropped his fork. It clattered loudly against the plate. "Enough," he said. "We didn't bring you here to talk about Grandma." "I figured," I said, patting my mouth with a napkin. "The roast is dry, Dad. What do you want?" "We need the money," Jessica blurted out. She slammed her hand on the table, rattling the wine glasses. "Now. Tonight." Thomas held up a hand to silence her. He looked at me, his eyes dead and hard. "Your sister is in trouble, Rosalind. Real trouble. She borrowed money. A lot of it." "From who?" I asked. "Banks don't lend to people with a credit score of 400. "Not a bank," Thomas whispered. "Hard money lenders. Private investors who don't file paperwork and don't care about credit scores. They care about collateral. We put the house up against the loan. But the interest, after it ballooned. They called the note due this morning." "How much?" $3.8 million, Jessica whispered, tears finally spilling over. "They said if I don't pay by midnight, they aren't just taking the house. They're going to hurt me, Rosalind. They sent pictures. They know where I sleep." I looked at my watch. 8:15. "You have until midnight to wire $3.8 million? I asked. "You're the trustee," Thomas said, his voice turning into a growl. "You have access to your grandmother's accounts. We know there's over $4 million in there. You are going to open that laptop, log in, and transfer the debt. That money is for charity," I said calmly. "It's in the bylaws." "Forget the bylaws," Thomas roared, slamming his fist down. "This is your sister's life. You are going to fix this. Now." The mask was off. There was no more sweetheart. No more family dinner. There were just 3 desperate animals in a cage, and I was the only one with the key. "I can't," I said, keeping my voice level. "It's not my money to give. It belongs to the foundation." Thomas didn't yell. He didn't flip the table. He stood up slowly, the heavy oak chair scraping against the floorboards like a warning shot. He walked past me, his footsteps heavy and deliberate, until he reached the double doors that led to the foyer. Click. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home echoed in the silent room. It was a final, metallic sound. He turned around, removed the brass key from the lock, and dropped it into his jacket pocket. Then he walked back to the table and picked up the steak knife. He didn't brandish it. He simply set it down in front of me, the serrated edge catching the chandelier light. "Nobody leaves," he whispered, "until the transfer is complete." The air left the room. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. It was a hostage situation. I looked at Linda. She wasn't horrified. She was nodding, her eyes hard and shiny. I looked at Jessica. She was grinning. A cruel twist of her lips that I remembered from every time she'd gotten me in trouble as a child. They were united in this. They were willing to commit a felony, willing to threaten violence, just to keep their facade from crumbling. I knew what I had to do. I had to sell the fear. If I looked too calm, they would know it was a trap. I had to become the Rosalind they remembered, the weak, pliable doormat. I let my lip tremble, forced my breath to shake, and squeezed my eyes until tears appeared. "Dad, please," I sobbed. "I could lose my license. I could go to jail." "You'll be fine," Linda sneered. "You hid the money. You can hide this." Jessica pointed at me and cackled. Pathetic victim routine. "Just open the laptop." Thomas's hand hovered near the knife. "Do it." I slumped, reached into my bag, and pulled out the laptop. They leaned in like vultures as I clicked the bookmark labeled Trust Access, a mirror site I built the night before. "Type the password," Jessica hissed. I entered it slowly, so they could memorize every character. The fake dashboard loaded, displaying a balance of $3.8 million. Their breath caught. Greed replaced restraint. "Transfer it," Thomas ordered. "All of it." My hand shook. "I can't." Jessica shoved me aside and typed the routing number for the loan sharks herself. Manic with triumph. "You tried to keep it," she spat. "But I win." "You shouldn't," I whispered. She hit enter. Instead of a confirmation page, the screen flashed red. A siren wailed. Red text screamed, "Critical security alert. Unauthorized access. Biometric captured. GPS locked. Law enforcement dispatched." They panicked. Clicking. Swearing. Demanding answers. "There is no money," I said, standing. "Calm now." Grandma donated the trust months ago. This was a trap. Their faces twisted in horror as the webcam blinked. Say hello to cybercrimes, I said. They just watched you threaten me and attempt wire fraud. Jessica collapsed. Thomas tried to shut the laptop. Linda cursed me, all venom and disbelief. You killed yourself, I told Jessica. I warned you not to press the button. Within minutes, sirens lit up the house. Police battered down the door and cuffed them one by one. Thomas stared at me like I had betrayed him. Jessica sobbed. Linda fought until she was dragged away. You are not family, she screamed. You're dead to us. I pulled out the quitclaim deed signed a decade earlier to dodge the IRS and told her quietly, this is my house. You were trespassing. They froze. That was the real death blow. As officers dragged them into the rain, I pressed additional charges. 6 months later, the house is mine. Light, clean, quiet. A letter arrived from Thomas. I burned it, unopened, and made tea in one of Grandma's cups. Sometimes the silence feels empty. Then I remember the knife. The red screen. Their eyes, as they chose greed over me. Family is everything. Which is why I had to escape mine.